This forum seeks to provide an opportunity for the IDB and Caribbean civil society, represented through the consults, to discuss development challenges, share experiences, and explore options for further collaboration.
We have put out this request for proposals funded by the Japanese government for community-based work for poverty reduction, and this is something that benefits between 5 and 7 civil society organizations per year. And that's a way that we found to leverage the work that these civil society organizations do in the area of agriculture, health, education, etc., with small communities, which is something which leads to the third role that I see for civil society organizations. This is something that they have an expertise that a bank does not necessarily have. You know, we're good with large stuff. We're not very good with small stuff. And so when you bring in the expertise, what we call the technology that the civil society organizations do, they bring a lot of value added to the work we do. And we can actually go one step down further to reach the real bottom, as we call the bottom of the pyramid, the poorer segments of the population. So there's a huge value added in this, and this is something that we want to leverage even further. And the Japanese fund, the request for proposals, is precisely to do this. And we don't stop there. We're already thinking, using our creative minds, to come up with further ways to support civil society organizations in the work that they do, not only with the IDB, but more importantly, with their own governments. Because I think that is the link that we need to reinforce. I think the link between IDB and civil society is a strong one, and you know, this event is one indicator of this. I think the link between IDB and governments is strong. They are member countries. We have a very close relationship. And I think the link between civil society and governments are the ones that need to be strengthened, and we IDB want to be the catalyst for that. We want to make it happen. So we're devising ways of bringing together the three parties, because we see that interaction, that loop among the three actors, is what really delivers the best outcome as far as development impacts and development projects.
We need you. The same way that you get access and you get to, you know, the Titanic of the IDB, you get to shift this huge ship and you get to influence what we do in the country, we also benefit from the interaction with you. We get a reality check. We get, for our designs, for our strategies. So it's a two-way street. So in this process, advocacy is everything. Advocacy of your individual development paths in each of your countries. Some people aren't in crisis, some people are growing and happy, not very many. Most people are having a hard time. So have a good conference, and I think it matters. And I think the presence of the Minister, of the Vice President, it says a lot. There's a reason why we're here, and this is serious.
Barbados Consult salutes the IDB, which has clearly recognized the efforts of the various non-state actors in advocacy and the various other roles that we play for our many constituents. We wish to place on record that much more is yet to be done. We appreciate the initiative, and if we are to advance successful development strategies to tackle the major issues that we're currently facing, we need to continue this very worthwhile initiative. To name a few, we share challenges of economic growth, regional competitiveness, gender issues, and youth employment. And there are several others that we have discussed around the table in the Barbados Council, and I'm sure at the various other regional councils.
Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that the term CONSOC refers to the civil society consulting groups, which is a forum for exchanging information, strengthening dialogue, and facilitating ongoing consultations between the bank and civil society organizations that are pertinent to the bank's work in the countries in which it operates. The CONSOCs do not have a legal status, nor should they be treated as a substantive mechanism to those already available in the IDB's formal structure, so to speak. Essentially, therefore, The essence of the concept allows the bank to obtain the views and ideas of civil society organizations on how to improve the bank's effectiveness in the social and economic development of borrowing countries. Of course, for this to take place, there has to be a collaboration between the country office and the local consort in such a way as to determine the operational principles and guidelines for engaging with the bank. And that, of course, reflect the realities of the countries, the context within which they operate, and the dynamics of the environment. This consort intervention by the bank, therefore, represents a new dimension in the terms of the bank's relationship with Barbados and other countries. Over the years, we have grown accustomed to the IDB being involved with Barbados, essentially in an economic partnership. We have seen the bank make loans for projects and various programs, and also providing technical assistance in support of such programs. But this has been in the economic and social sphere of the development process, not in any way involving by a large civil society in the deeper context of its operations. So in this regard, I therefore wish to acknowledge the fact that during the past 3 decades or more, the IDB has been very supportive of Barbados. Indeed, within the past 2 decades in particular, the IDB has contributed significantly towards the economic and social development of the country. This fact is so very real that I wish to take the opportunity to highlight 1 or 2 of the major areas in which the IDB has participated and which has characterized the bank's involvement in the development process of Barbados. Perhaps I can take you back a couple of years. During the early 1990s, Barbados encountered an economic crisis, not quite dissimilar to what we have at the present moment. The economic situation was characterized by a sharp decline in output of our major productive sectors and export-earning industries in the economy. Indeed, it was actually the very first time, at least up until the recorded history in Barbados, that all of our major foreign exchange earning sectors registered significant declines at the same time. In addition, there were large fiscal and external deficits and rising unemployment. As a result, with little or no foreign exchange, as I indicated yesterday when I spoke to the Chamber of Commerce, Barbados was forced to seek an IMF program for balance of payments support. Such was unavoidable, unlike what we have at this present moment, where we've been able, through the crisis, to maintain approximately 19 weeks of international reserves in the various banking institutions in Barbados. And the assistance was from the fund, though necessary, was not enough. And we sought out and received assistance from the Inter-American Development Bank in the form of an investment sector loan. Indeed, the IDB's support to the tune of US $30 million was supported as well by a $3.5 million US technical cooperation grant. This loan was aimed at resuscitating the major productive sectors of our economy so that it could have produced and exported once again. This IDB loan was particularly instrumental in providing the financing resources necessary to undertake sectoral restructuring that led to a restoration of growth. Those who are familiar with this situation know that as a result of this action, as early as 1994, the economy of Barbados had returned to positive growth. And comments from all sides and professional points of view indicated that the multi-sectoral loan program, among other factors, contributed in no small way to the recovery of Barbados's economy. Of course, there were a set of strategic policies which also accompanied those financial resources. And I think I feel constrained this morning to indicate to you, Mr. Vice President, that perhaps we need a similar loan today.
Writing the check.
I say that with all degree of seriousness because I think having just come from the Caribbean Development Bank meeting in St. Lucia, where the IDB did in fact sign a cooperation agreement with the banks to facilitate lending to some of the non-IDB members, most of whom are in the OECS region. One of the laments of that meeting was the fact that many of our countries who are going through this current economic downturn crisis of high deficits and high debt have had to deal with circumstances that are largely, in many respects, beyond their control to deal with in terms of the impact of the international economic downturn, but also of the impact of disasters on many of the countries, particularly those in the OECS that have suffered strikes by hurricanes. But we could also add to that fact the reality that many of our countries over the last 2 decades have had to suffer successive hits by international economic actions, some of which we have most of which we have very little control over. For Barbados, it has been clear as well. We have been cut off from concessional financing from the World Bank and many other institutions because of our level of economic development. We are therefore forced to go on the international capital markets to borrow money or to borrow money in other places at very high interest rates. Equally, we've had to suffer the problem of liberalizing our markets in international global trading agreements. We no longer have preferential access for our products into the European Union, into the United States, and we are currently negotiating the liberalization of market access into Canada. It means, therefore, that not only do we have to access resources at higher prices and really at world competitive prices on the private capital markets, we also have now little leeway into markets on a preferential basis because of the preferential arrangements have been removed. But added to that, we have to have the constant battle of fighting to protect our international financial and business subsectors against repeated claims of being tax havens, which is not true, of course. We are a low tax regime, but we do tax and we do regulate. So when you really look at it, all of the major areas, with the exception of tourism services, for which our countries have traditionally and over the last 50 years built up the so-called success of our economies, have now become instruments of bludgeoning for many of our economies. It means, therefore, that the cost of intervention and engagement within the economic sectors has gone up for many of our countries. And then, of course, our colleagues from the bank, from the IMF, from the World Bank, most of whom are fascinated with research, and we all like research, love to write about the circumstances surrounding these countries and how their debts and their deficits have risen, even as they struggle to provide social services, critical social services, education, healthcare, sanitation, clean water, and so forth and so on, to ever-demanding populations that we say, I think quite nonchalantly, but quite correctly, are really the greatest resource that we have. So therefore, there is a deficit, in my view, not just in terms of fiscal deficit, there is a deficit in the understanding of the fundamentals of the management of small open economies in a very volatile and potentially vicious international economic environment. And in the context of that, colleagues, I believe that it is necessary now for us to seriously look how we do the business of financing for development purposes. So apart from the multilateral investment loan which we got from the IDB, we have received a number of loans down through the years that have redounded very well to the development of Barbados. Some of these including the EduTech loan, or what we call commonly the EduTech, but really officially it's called the Education Sector Enhancement Project. We've done work, of course, in housing, agriculture, competitiveness, standards, procurement, and the strengthening of the statistical services in the country. These interventions have been undertaken to the tune of $65.7 million. And of course, in the current country strategy, that is 2009-2013, there's been a focus on water resources management, alternative energy, education, and coastal zone management. And the current strategy provides for US $240 million towards the economic and social development of Barbados, all wrapped up in project loans, with the exception, of course, of the energy PBLs of $145 million, alternative energy PBLs, which have allowed us to bring ourselves to the stage where we can now begin to build out a strong alternative energy sector, backed, of course, by a national policy framework and a legislative framework governing how energy will be produced and distributed and sold in the country. Of course, these are very critical interventions because it means that a country such as Barbados that expends close to $400 million on energy every year should be able, over the next 5 years to decade and beyond, to begin to bring that down and, of course, adjust our fiscal accounts accordingly. And already, ladies and gentlemen, our colleagues at the IDB working with government are looking ahead at the 2014 to 18 country strategy for the country, which again will focus very heavily on projects in water, sanitation development, coastal zone management, alternative energy, infrastructure, agriculture, and so forth and so on. So that this conference therefore represents a watershed in the relations between the IDB and Barbados, since it directs its focus and attention fairly and squarely on civil society and a special and unique relationship both with the government and with the bank in terms of their operations in Barbados, and of course for those who are from outside in the other parts of the region. And that social partnership, which we have forged for many years, and which has been extended in an informal way to include other civil society groups, I think is a critical mechanism in pushing that forward. And this special thrust in the development of the civil society, therefore, for the IDB and for us in the region, we believe is absolutely critical, as it then, of course, matches what is happening with other international institutions such as the European Union and, of course, the World Bank, many, many years before those organizations would have come into this, to this process. So that the concept comes at a time when pockets of poverty have been recognized in many of our countries, Barbados not excluded, mainly as a result of a continuation of recessionary conditions, but equally as well because of a loss of value in many of our sectors, particularly in our social sectors. And these are challenges which we have to face. So I'm saying respectfully this morning to all of you here, gathered here, that the IDB, which has long been recognized as the single largest international financial partner in the economic and social development of its members, in particularly in Barbados and those in the region, that through this initiative, you have definitely demonstrated again that you have a close interest in what happens in our societies and to include and democratize the process of development. I think you should be lauded for this. But may I offer a, yes, I think we really should. But may I issue a word of caution? And this goes back to the point that I was making. It is important that whatever we do in the relationship we have, in terms of this partnership, that it does not prescribe or seek to prescribe conditions which none of us can successfully navigate. Whether it is in project work or it is in straight financing options and mechanisms, we have to ensure that what we do is realistic and achievable. Setting unrealistic goals, establishing unrealistic mechanisms of compliance, whether it is in projects or otherwise, and then lamenting the fact that we have not been able to achieve what we said we wanted to achieve is not a remedy for success. It actually is a remedy for failure It is a remedy for defeatism, and it does not achieve the goals which we want to achieve. Our view is that new, interesting, innovative, and adaptable instruments have to be created to assist those countries that have been and are now currently unable to navigate this, the world's greatest recession that we've known, have to be created to assist those countries to do so. We see the IDB as a champion in this particular regard. And we believe that the IDB, through its extensive research and human resource capacity, should be able and will be able to meet the challenge of working with our countries to safely navigate the choppy waters of this international recession, even as we work with our partners in civil society to ensure that those most marginalized in our communities can continue to participate in the life and livelihoods of their own countries. It means, therefore, that what we require of our bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, that it truly continues to live up to its mantra as a development bank. We see the IDB as a development institution, understanding development in ways that other international financial institutions do not. And therefore, the responsibility of all of the members and the management of the bank is to ensure that that process continues into the future. The IDB, I would like to say, and I always say, should not see itself as a second-rate version of the IMF. It is not. It should not see itself as aspiring to become the World Bank. It will never be that. It is a development institution constructed and established to serve its members and to ensure that those who are going through difficulties are able to manage those successfully. Successful countries, member countries, mean a successful bank. The failure of your membership means essentially a failure of the bank. That's my question. I'm sure that our colleagues fully understand what I am speaking about, and I know that with this in mind, we will work together to get past what current difficulties we are experiencing in the development of our fiscal policy base. We have no choice but to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to apologize for detaining you as long as I have with my ramblings on development and economy and the IDB and so forth and so on. But I think it was absolutely critical that these messages are sent now, because as you know, and as I said yesterday, now is the time for action in our economy and in the Caribbean if we are to ensure that our countries survive the fiscal and debt crises that we are facing at the current moment. I believe that we can work together to produce the types of results that our people expect from us. I encourage members of civil society to join us in this, not battle or fight, but to join us in this race to the finish. It is not for the swift, but it is for the assured. And I believe working together, we can assure the people of Barbados, as we do the people of the region, that better days are ahead.